The graves were breathing. The ground swelled and fell. Soil lifted. Soil sank. Cracked stones shivered as if alive. Grass bent in slow rhythm, bowing with each pull of air. I heard it clear. Not wind, not thunder. A wet sound of lungs working below. Exhaling rot. Inhaling silence. Every mound rose with the same pulse. Every mound collapsed again. Flowers shook loose their petals. Crosses leaned forward, then straightened. The night pressed down heavy. My chest matched the rhythm, though I fought it. Cold seeped through my shoes. The dirt flexed like muscle. A line of ants scattered in panic, burrowing away from the rising soil. The air reeked of iron. Damp cloth, old blood sealed under stone. My breath misted white, though it wasn't cold. The graves sighed louder. A dragging moan rose from below, like 100 throats opening in the dark. The ground trembled soft, steady, not like an earthquake, but like the beat of a hidden heart. I froze. My legs shook. The sound pressed into me, inside me. Every shadow lengthened and shrank again. Headstones tilted, then stilled. The silence between breaths was worse. It was waiting, listening. Something beneath measured me, counted me. My name whispered without voice. Stop. A thought or a warning? I don't know. Then the soil lifted higher, too high, as if the earth itself pulled in a final breath. I swear I felt the graves look up, and I knew. I should not have been there. The ground was alive. The cemetery was breathing. I should have left Detroit years ago. The city was already collapsing in on itself, brick by brick, window by window. Factories became empty ribs, streets buckled, weeds growing through the cracks like veins. I came back because a letter told me to. No seal, no sender, just 2 words I could not ignore. Hollow rest. I told myself I would look, write a note, and go. That was the lie I needed to enter the gate. Hollow rest sat where the city thinned into scrub and rail yards. The iron fence curled like bone. Marble angels hid their faces with chipped hands. Every marker leaned, but didn't fall. Detroit had its own weather out here. The air felt heavier, like the sky rested lower over the ground. I heard the freeway far off, a bad dream with headlights, and then I heard nothing at all. I used to work with men who wear collars and keep folders. That was before I learned there are rules older than books. Now I work alone. I write down what people can't say out loud. I walk where the map fades. The letter said people were missing. It named 3 streets and 5 houses. It didn't say dead, it said missing. The difference matters when you still hope to bring someone home. Father Thomas waited at the gate with a brass key that didn't fit any lock I could see. His cassock was threadbare and clean. His eyes were patient in the way of men who have watched many seasons arrive empty. "Do not count the graves after sundown," he said before I introduced myself. "Do not read the names out loud. Do not stay once the bell goes silent." He spoke like a man repeating a prayer he doesn't love but still believes. I nodded because you nod when someone older places rules in your hands like candles. Clara Mitchell still tended the flowers near the chapel, though she never spoke after dusk. People noticed, but no one ever said her name aloud. Eleanor Price walked up the path as if the ground belonged to her. Maybe it did. She was the kind of woman who kept a ledger in her head and never forgot a debt. "You are Mr. Graves," she said, and I didn't ask how she knew. We have lived with hollow rest longer than any of us can remember. We keep our side of the balance and the ground keeps its side. She folded her hands like a closing book. "If you write anything, write that we're still here." Daniel Harris stayed near the fence. He watched me the way a strayed dog watches a stranger with food in hand. He wanted help, but didn't believe in it. "People vanish," he said, scratching a scar along his wrist. They don't move, they don't call, they just go. Everyone says it's the count, everyone says it's the old way. And then they set the table for one less and pretend it's fine. I asked him how many. He looked at his shoes and said, "Enough." Detroit speaks with pictures, not words. A factory crane rusts into a skeleton hand. A row of homes wears plywood for eyelids. A church door hangs open, and the hymnals sleep in dust. In the middle of it, hollow rest holds its posture. Grass cut low, stones brushed clean. Someone tends the place like a garden. Someone loves it, or fears it enough to polish the edges. I walked the perimeter at noon, counting steps and not stones. The rule about counting was simple and sharp. The last time I ignored a rule like that, a choir burned, and I did not. I carry what happened in the lining of my lungs. Every case since then smells like smoke, even when no match has been struck. This place didn't smell like smoke. It smelled like rain that never falls. Father Thomas showed me the chapel on the hill. The windows were plain glass, the pews scarred by names carved with keys. "We ring the bell at dusk," he said. "Once. It's a courtesy. A sign to finish your business and go." "What business?" I asked. He looked at the rows below us. Goodbyes. Numbers. The quiet things a family says when they don't want to say them. He closed the door with both hands, as if he feared the hinges would choose otherwise. Eleanor led me through a lane of yews to a plaque that didn't match the rest. The metal was new. The words were old. Equal in soul, equal in earth. "We didn't put that there," she said, "but it isn't wrong." She told me her father taught her to walk the rows without gazing down, to feel the count in her feet, not her eyes. "The ground remembers better than we do," she said. "We honor that memory and stay alive." I asked to see the houses the letter named. We left by a service gate and drove 3 blocks on roads the city forgot to fix. A swing set stood in a field with no school. Children had been here once. The dirt still held the curve of their paths. At the first address, the porch light was on. Bills curled in the mailbox. The kitchen table held 4 plates, clean and stacked. A calendar on the wall hung open to a month with no pen marks. A life paused the day someone didn't come home. Daniel waited outside while I walked the rooms. He didn't want to see what he already knew. "It was the same on Ridley," he said. "Same on Bell. Same on Farquhar. The houses forget before we do." I asked him why no one called the police. He gave me a look I've learned to accept. "We called everyone. They come, they write, they go. They say there's no crime here. They say there's no proof of harm. They say people leave Detroit all the time." He sniffed and smiled without warmth. "They aren't wrong. They aren't right either." The sun sagged toward the old smokestacks and the city changed color. Rust became red. Concrete turned the color of cold meat. We stopped for coffee in a diner that played a radio from a decade ago. The waitress called me honey and put down a cup thick as a brick. When I asked about Hollow Rest, she shook her head and said, "I don't serve after dark." She brought the check early and wished me luck in a way that sounded like a prayer. Back at the gate, Father Thomas stood with the bell rope in one hand. Daniel kept distance. Eleanor watched the sky as if it owed her rent. "You can walk the rows now," Father Thomas said, "but not long, and not with curiosity." "Curiosity is my work," I said. He let the rope slip an inch. "It will be your end here." Eleanor raised her chin. "Ask what you came to ask. The ground will answer in its language whether or not we speak." Daniel muttered, "The ground speaks with breath." He didn't raise his eyes. I walked. I saw the sign change as I crossed the bridge into the old district. Population 3,121 flickered once and became population 3,422. It didn't tick like an odometer. It didn't blink like a failed bulb. It simply decided, and then the number held like a breath, held too long. I pulled over at the curb and watched the face of the sign as if it might confess. Rust rimmed the edges, vines crept up a post. No wires hung loose, no camera blinked. A bus scraped past and threw a wave of grit into the air. The number didn't move again. A child on a blue bike coasted by and looked up at the sign with the casual reverence of someone who had seen it change before and learned not to point. Daniel met me on Grayling, 2 blocks from Hollow Rest. He shoved his hands into the pockets of a jacket too thin for the wind. "It counts you when you come," he said. "It always does." "It is an old city sign," I said. "Someone installed a feed. Or it's tied to records. People love a trick." He shook his head. "Records don't breathe." I let that sit and tried again. "A school project. A prank. A municipal toy someone forgot to turn off." Daniel stared past me at the dying trees. "You think a prank holds for decades?" I didn't answer. I had other examples. Other towns with other rules, and none of them had lasted this long. We walked toward the cemetery without agreeing to. The daylight thinned into something gray and private. Streetlights blinked in a chain behind us. Ahead, the iron arch of Hollow Rest swallowed the sky into a darker shape. I heard freeway noise turn to static and then to nothing. The absence of sound pressed like cotton in my ears. I told myself I would leave before full dark. I told myself I would jot the note and put the sign in a report. The ground disagreed with my timeline. It always does. Eleanor stood by the gate with a clipboard and a calm that made my teeth ache. "The bell in 10 minutes, she said without greeting. "We like the ruse clear by then." "I am only observing," I said. "Observation takes time," she said. "Time is the one thing you can't barter with here." She turned and walked the fence, checking latches that didn't matter to the dirt. Father Thomas appeared from the chapel with the rope looped around his forearm. "Say what you have to say in daylight," he told us. "Afterwards, the ground listens for answers." "Answers to what?" I asked. "To questions you didn't mean to ask," he said, and took his place by the bell. We stepped inside the arch. The grass lay flat and patient. The stones leaned and didn't fall. The likeness of an angel had lost its face to acid rain, and now wore a smooth blank oval where eyes had been. Names came and went under my gaze because I refused to let them settle. Counting begins with attention, so I let my attention skitter like a water bug over a pond, never landing too long, never naming out loud. Daniel pointed toward a far row. "Do not go near the low ground," he said. "It holds the pull longer." "The pull," I said. "That is the word everyone uses. You will know it when your steps begin to match it." He spoke softly, and still it felt too loud for the place. I found myself whispering like a child inside a library. At the center path, a woman laid white flowers without letting her knees touch the dirt. A man beside her held a winter hat, though the air was warm. They didn't speak to each other. They breathed together. The bell rang once. It didn't carry. The sound fell straight down, hit something that wasn't hollow, and stopped. The woman stood at once. The man folded the hat and put it in his pocket. They left without looking back. "You see it?" Daniel said when they were gone. "Everyone acts like the rules are choice. They are not. The rules are reins. You hold them, or you get dragged." "Dragged by what?" "By the count," he said. "By the part of the city that cares about numbers more than names." He took a breath and changed the subject because the subject doesn't like its own name spoken. Night came like a door closing with care. No slam, no bang, just the quiet decision of a latch. The sky flattened. The air thickened. I should have left then. Instead, I followed a path of crushed stone that looked gray in any light and stopped at a row that had not been there in my memory of daylight. Nothing obvious had moved, and yet the geometry had shifted. The lanes looked narrower. The stones looked higher. Then my eyes settled on fresh dirt near the end of the row. I saw the frame before I let myself see the name. A clean rectangle where grass had not grown. A marker still chalked at the edges from the stonecutter's hand. I didn't read it. I looked away and then back because looking away is the thing that puts you in danger here. The name didn't change, neither did the date. The letter said Peter Graves. The date said today. My mouth dried at once. I didn't believe in omens. I don't like being told what will happen to me. I took a step back and forced air into my lungs because the ground would not give me any. Someone carved a joke, I said to no one. Someone decided to scare the man from out of town. My voice sounded like a tape played too slow. I could hear the record of fear in it. Daniel came up at a run and then stopped short, as if the dirt drew a line he could not cross. He saw the stone. His eyes shone in the kind of light that isn't light. "No," he said. "Not you." I tried to laugh and could not. "Explain it," I said. "Explain how fast a mason can work." Daniel shook his head slowly. "The ground chooses the letters. We only read." I bent and touched the face of the stone. It was dry and warm, as if the day still clung to it. The carved grooves held a fine chalk dust that smeared onto my fingers. The date looked like a dare. "It will pass," I said. "Tomorrow it will be a name I don't know." "Tomorrow the number will need a body," Daniel said. "Today it has decided to tell you which one." Conversation tore open then, quicker than I wanted, sharper than the air allowed. "Listen to me," Daniel said. "The graves breathe. They have to. Someone must lie down, or the ground itself opens." "Bodies don't breathe once they're under dirt," I said. "Air can't pass a yard of soil." "This is theater." "Theater doesn't cool your hands when you lay them on the turf," he said. "Theater doesn't pull your legs to the low ground when you turn your back." "This is a town legend," I said. "A ritual to explain loss, a way to carry grief together. Eleanor writes it down as balance, and the church blesses the math. You can feel better about chance if you pretend it's order." Daniel clenched his jaw. "You want it to be a story. I want it not to be real. Neither of us gets what we want." A wind moved without moving. Grass lay down and rose in a wave that rolled across 3 rows and returned. The breath came back, slow and heavy, like the bell sound sinking in reverse. It pushed against my knees. It pressed my coat against my ribs. For a moment it felt like someone lived under my feet and was drawing a measured breath before speech, and then it stopped. The silence after it wasn't empty. It was full of counting. Father Thomas reached us with the tired speed of a man who has run this same path too many nights. He looked once at the stone with my name and closed his eyes. "You have to go," he said. "Now. This minute. Do not speak. Do not argue. Go." "That is my name," I said, arm out, finger on the chalk left in the R. "Names aren't permanent here," he said, "but the balance is. Do you want the dirt to pick a child instead? Do you want it to open for a street you like to walk? Go." He took my elbow and then let go because even he didn't want to be caught holding me if the pull began. I stepped back from the stone like it might bite. The chalk dust on my fingers felt heavier than it should have. Eleanor arrived with her ledger and no polite words left inside her. "You don't get to decide this," she said. "No one does. We honor the count. We don't tempt it. We don't mock it." "Someone made a marker in an hour," I said. "That is all. You are letting superstition turn into law." Her voice cut clean. "Law keeps children alive." "At what cost?" I asked. "At the cost the ground already chose," she said. The church had no candles left. The windows were plain glass that had learned to be colorless. Benches sat in two crooked rows, polished by the weight of bodies that no longer came. I closed the door behind me, and the echo died fast, like sound knew better than to linger. Eleanor was already there, standing near the pulpit with a ledger under her arm and dust on her cuffs. "You came because the stone used your name," she said. "I came because I don't like being counted without consent," I said. "Consent is for people who believe the ground negotiates," she said, and set the ledger on the pulpit. Wind threaded the rafters and failed to make a song. I took the front pew and waited for a sermon I didn't want. Eleanor opened the ledger and didn't look at it. She looked at me, as if the book could read itself. "Listen carefully," she said. "This city once had a pulse you could hear from the river. Factories ate daylight and spit out wages. Houses multiplied. Porches learned names. When the line broke, people left, but the count did not. Numbers are loyal in ways people are not. Hollow Rest had mirrored the city for 100 years, row to row, stone to house, birth to carving. Then the birth rooms emptied, and the plant gates locked, and the ledger lost entries it needed to stay even. At first the ground waited, as if patience could make people return. Then it grew hungry. It opened at night in places no one watched. It took what it needed and closed itself again with the care of a seamstress. We learned the rules and stopped calling them rules. We called them respect. We called them balance. We survived because we let the earth finish its arithmetic. I wanted to argue that hunger isn't a god and balance isn't a law, but the words felt like tools for a job I didn't understand. "You say the cemetery is alive," I said finally, "alive enough to prefer a number." Eleanor nodded once. "Alive enough to remember what the city promised it." "And what did the city promise?" I asked. "Companionship," she said. "A mirror, a measure, a perfect pair. The living above and the counted below. We didn't know we were promising. The ground didn't forget." She walked to the center aisle and let her fingers trail the wood as if testing whether it would splinter. "You think I enjoyed telling you this," she said. "I would prefer you write about a trick of light and a cruel prank. But when the factories failed, grief needed shape. The earth offered one. Shape that eats people," I said. My voice came out thin. "Shape that keeps the rest from falling through," she answered. Rain began and stopped on the roof in a handful of drops, too few to call weather. Eleanor leaned back against the pulpit and watched the doors for a moment as if expecting an interruption that never came. "What happens if the count is short?" I asked. "You felt it last night," she said. "The pull, the breath. The low ground wakes first because it's closest to the old river vein. If we refuse to honor the number, the ground honors itself. Roads sink, floors dip. A porch lets go of a nail, and a man falls through and no one finds him. We pretend it's decay. Decay doesn't hum before it eats. Decay doesn't correct the ledger." I let the silence sit, because silence is part of the work. "There is a stone with my name," I said. "If I leave, does it choose someone else?" Eleanor didn't flinch. "If you leave, it will keep the number. It always keeps the number." "With who?" "With someone the city can spare," she said, and that was the first sentence that made her throat tighten. Anger is useful when you can aim it. Mine had nowhere to go. "You are telling me the only moral act here is surrender," I said. "I am telling you the only moral act here is honesty," she said. "Pretending there's no appetite doesn't starve it." I stood. The old wood spoke under my shoes. "Call it superstition," I said. "Call it ritual. But don't call it mercy." Eleanor closed the ledger. Mercy is a word people use when they don't want to say math. She moved closer until I could see a fleck of white paint on her coat sleeve where the chapel wall had given up a flake. "You want a villain," she said. "You want a story that says somebody chooses. We don't choose. We keep the rows clean. We warn strangers. We ring the bell to remind people that time isn't a rumor. We ask the ground to take its due with dignity and not with waste. That is what a town can do when it has fallen farther than anyone will admit." I pressed my palms together and didn't pray. "What if the number grows?" I asked. "What if people come back? What happens then?" "Then we add cradles, and the earth adds marble," she said. "We don't fear that version of the rule." A book of hymns lay open on the third pew from the back, swollen with moisture. I walked to it because walking gave me a task. Names were penciled inside the cover, lists of altos and tenors from a year when the choir still existed. Someone had drawn a line through a few names, not with violence, with resignation. It looked like a rehearsal to me. It looked like a practice round for the ledger. Eleanor spoke again, not to me, to the room. "He thinks he can leave because he knows a road out," she said softly. "But there are no roads out of a rule. There are only roads around it, and they always circle back here." "Say what you came to say," I told her. "Say the thing you don't want to say out loud." She breathed in, and the rafters didn't answer. "If you live," she said, "the ground will take someone else. It will pick the weakest stitch. It will choose the house with one light instead of two. It will lower a porch the width of a name, and it will be done." I felt the sentence like a hand in my chest. "So if I lie down, the ledger is satisfied," I said. "If I do not, someone I will never meet falls through a floor." "Yes," Eleanor said. "That is the choice I live with every morning." I wanted to ask who she had buried. I did not. The question already knew it could wound and was eager for the work. Instead, I asked, "And if we refuse both options?" Eleanor took her time. "Then the count grows ill. The breath grows rough. The town begins to come apart at the edges. And sooner or later, the gate won't close for anyone." "You talk like the cemetery is a person," I said. "I talk like the cemetery is a covenant," she said. "We keep our side, or it keeps it for us." The door creaked, though no one touched it. Cold moved over my hands as if someone had opened a drawer full of winter. I remembered the stone with my name and the chalk that would not wash clean. "If I stay the night," I said. "If I lie down and the dirt covers me, the number quiets. And if I leave, someone else is covered." "Yes," she said again, and the second yes was harder to carry than the first. I sat back down because the room swayed a degree, and I didn't want to give the earth the satisfaction of catching me. "You could have told me a kinder version," I said. "Kindness isn't a currency that spends here," she said. "Then tell me why you keep the ledger," I said. "If nothing we do changes the appetite, why write?" Eleanor lifted the book. "Because remembering is our side of the agreement. The ground keeps numbers. We keep names. If we stop writing, we become another city that vanished and left no record of its manners." A drip from the roof found the pulpit and tapped there like a metronome waiting for a hymn that never starts. Eleanor closed her eyes for a breath that wasn't for her. "You will ask if we have ever tried to cheat," she said. "Of course we tried. We moved people away at dusk. We held hands across thresholds. We kept a baby awake all night to change a date. Every lie was paid back with interest. Streets buckled. A school sank an inch and took a teacher with it. We don't cheat anymore." I looked at the simple cross above the pulpit and saw a crack running through it clean as a rule. "Balance," I said, and hated the word. "Balance," she repeated, and didn't hate it as much as I did. I stood and paced the center aisle because motion felt like the last privilege the ground still allowed me. "If I stay," I said, "you write my name and the date, you ring the bell once, you let the number settle, and then you go on." Eleanor nodded. The first crack came like a cough under the floor of the city. A line split between two stones and dust leapt upward in a dry spray. Then another crack, then another. The ground moved as if ribs spread. Names on granite quivered. Crosses tilted forward like listeners. Breath became sound, not human, not wind. A ripping draw, a ragged exhale. It built until the air screamed without voice. The rows shook. New mounds rose raw and wet, as if pushed from below by fists too large to hide. Markers shoved up with chalk still bleeding on their faces. One after another, new graves lifted like teeth sprouting in a jaw. Every rise matched a fall. Holes opened. The earth yawned wide. People ran. Shoes slapped gravel. Children screamed thin and high. A man dropped to his knees and prayed until the ground swallowed his knees. He vanished chest first. His arms flailed once and then nothing. A woman pulled at his coat until the seams tore free. She fell backward holding cloth that still bled warmth. Figures climbed from the soil, not staggering, not blind. They rose smooth, in rhythm with the breath below. Eyes filmed white, chests rising and falling in the same cadence as the earth. They inhaled when the ground inhaled. They exhaled when the ground exhaled. Every motion precise, every sound matched. Not a horde, a choir. The wind took shape. It sliced between stones with a shriek like metal on stone. Grass tore from its roots. Dust stormed sideways. Shouts cut short as bodies hit the ground. A boy cried until the breath beneath drowned his own breath. Father Thomas shouted once, "Run!" His voice broke like old wood. Eleanor screamed a name I didn't know, and her mouth filled with dirt carried on air. Daniel gripped my arm and dragged me sideways. The earth opened behind us with a heave like a lung too large for the cage it wore. We stumbled across markers that split at our weight. Voices rose from the ground. Not cries, not warnings, just breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Every second, another grave lifted. I saw 3 men try to pull a gate shut. The hinges sheared. The posts sank. The bars bent like reeds and were drawn down inch by inch until they vanished flush with the soil. A woman climbed the chapel steps. The wood split under her feet and the stone foundation fell inward like sand. She screamed once and was gone. The bell rope swung free without sound. The dead moved through the living without speed or rage. They walked where the breath directed. They touched shoulders and pulled people down without force, only gravity. A child clung to a statue until stone cracked under his grip and lowered him in. Prayers scattered the air in broken syllables. "God, please, save!" None lasted longer than the earth's next inhale. Daniel shouted in my ear, "Keep moving!" I could not tell if his voice was his or the ground's. My ribs beat against my chest like fists. My shoes slipped in, dust turned wet. The smell of blood came without bodies, iron in the throat, thick as fog. The air itself fractured. Heat surged and died. Cold took its place. Every breath cost more than the last. My vision blurred with grit. I fell once, palms scraping chalk from a fresh stone, the name smudged, not mine, not anyone I knew. Daniel hauled me up with both hands and hissed, "Do not look again." Everywhere the ground opened, taking benches, fences, statues, houses near the edge. Windows caved inward as if lungs had sucked glass. Roofs bent and folded like paper in rain. People scattered, but the cemetery moved with them, swallowing steps as fast as they were made. The noise reached pitch. Not thunder, not train, not storm. A A single body breathing through a torn throat. It rolled through marrow. It bent steel. It shook every tooth in my jaw until blood ran at my gums. Father Thomas fell to his knees and shouted words I didn't hear. Then soil closed over his back and he was gone. Eleanor's ledger lay open in the dirt, pages flipping though no wind touched them. Names inked there bled across the margins. The ground read faster than she had ever written. She clutched at the book until her knuckles split. Then it tore from her hands and slid into a seam of earth that sealed itself smooth. I wanted to scream, but the air left no room for sound. The only voice was the breath. The only rhythm was inhale, exhale. The graves rose and sank in their endless proof. And all around, people vanished into the lungs of Detroit. Glass shattered, lamps burst, stone cracked, air shook. I ran though the ground ran faster. Breaths counted higher, and every step I made was another step the city measured for the hole that waited. The night broke me into fragments and left me scattered along the empty streets. When the earth closed its mouth, when the graves stopped rising and the breath slipped back underground, I was still standing, alive, or something close enough to pass for it. The city didn't roar. It didn't mourn. It only stared through broken windows and hollowed towers as if waiting for me to leave. I walked through Detroit as dawn failed to bring light. Smoke clung to corners where no fire smoldered. Storefronts sagged, their letters half fallen, their windows webbed with cracks. A bus sat abandoned at an intersection, doors open, seats empty, as if everyone inside had decided together to vanish mid-route. The silence gnawed louder than any scream. A metropolis turned mausoleum. I passed Hollow Rest again. The gate leaned on its hinges, half buried in earth that looked as though it had never moved. The grass was pressed flat, the stones realigned, the chaos erased as if night had been a dream. But the ground smelled of iron and rot, and every step I took hummed with a rhythm I could not escape. The graves had kept count. They always would. I forced myself into the rows, against every warning still burning in my mind. My shoes sank shallow into soft dirt. There it was, the stone that had borne my name. But now it did not. Clara Mitchell. Letters still raw from the cutter's hand. Yesterday's date carved beneath them. Her mound rose where mine had been. Her flowers drooped in the half-light, stems bent, petals bruised by night air. The earth had rewritten its ledger. I had been spared. She had not. Father Thomas's voice was gone, swallowed with the soil. Eleanor's ledger had vanished with her hands still clutching it. Their absence pressed heavier than the silence around me. I remembered her face from the path, eyes down, hands clutching blossoms. I remembered thinking she looked like anyone, like everyone. And now she was everyone. She was the sum the ground had chosen in my place. My survival wasn't victory. It was theft. The balance had demanded one, and I had let it pick for me. I touched the marker and pulled back as if burned. The stone pulsed warmth that had no source in the sun. My breath faltered. For a moment, I could not tell whether the lungs inside my ribs belonged to me or to the soil that measured me. Clara's name stood in my stead, proof that the cemetery kept promises better than the living ever could. I staggered away, but every corner of the city reflected her absence. A house with curtains swaying in an open window, a swing still moving though no wind blew, a cup of coffee cooling on a porch rail that leaned too far. Each detail accused me. Each detail asked why my lungs still worked. I had no answer. Detroit was hollowed long before Hollow Rest claimed its due, but now it felt emptied beyond repair. No voices carried, no traffic stirred. Sirens didn't rise because there was no one left to answer them. I moved through streets like veins already bled dry. I was blood left behind, nothing more. My survival tasted of rust. My heartbeat carried the weight of subtraction. I wasn't alive. I was unchosen. The cemetery had made room for me by closing over Clara Mitchell. Her breath was gone. Mine continued only because the ground had permitted the exchange. Every inhale an insult, every exhale a confession. I sat on the steps of a burned-out church. The cross above the door leaned at a wrong angle, cracked through its spine. I imagined Clara kneeling inside once, whispering prayers that went unheard. I wondered if she had felt the pull before me, if her dreams had carried the rhythm I could not shake. The city would never tell me. The cemetery had already decided. Afternoon came but never brightened. Clouds hung so low they looked like another ceiling over ruins. I walked until my legs trembled. Each step felt borrowed, a debt carried on behalf of someone else. I wanted to write Clara's name in my notebook, but the pen stuttered, ink refusing to mark, as if even the page knew it wasn't mine to record. Her absence didn't belong to me, yet I carried it all the same. By evening I stood on the bridge out of the district. The population sign still glowed unblinking. 3,422. It had no need to change. Clara's absence had balanced me. Balance satisfied the ground, balance silenced the count. Every car that should have passed remained missing. Every face that should have filled the sidewalks lay hidden beneath. I leaned against the railing until rust broke loose in flakes beneath my hand. Survivor. The word echoed hollow in my head. I was no survivor. I was the remainder in an equation someone else had paid. Detroit had not given me life. It had only allowed me to continue because another name had replaced mine. Freedom meant nothing when the air in my chest belonged to the earth's accounting. I wasn't alive by right. I was alive by exchange. I turned once more toward hollow rest. The rose lay patient in the dusk. No breath stirred the grass, no stone moved, but the silence carried weight. The silence remembered. The silence promised. One day it would need another Clara. One day it would come again. My steps echoed on the bridge, and even that sound felt borrowed. I write this with no faith left, no prayer, no plea, just the truth of what I saw and what I became. A city turned to ledger, a cemetery turned to lungs, a man turned to remainder, and though I live only in her place. Clara Mitchell's stone bears witness to that. The ground holds her. The ground holds me still, in debt, in silence. The graves were breathing. I keep walking because stopping feels like permission. The silence follows close, matching step for step. Detroit breathes through the holes it has left, and I breathe with it, unwilling, unable, bound. This isn't a confession. It isn't a prayer. It's only a record left in the ruins, a warning carved in silence. I've walked long enough to know that Detroit is only scaffolding now, a shell built over something that keeps count. You may see only stone rows and iron gates, but I tell you they're ribs of a thing that breathes. Every inhalation you mistake for wind is the ground keeping its measure. Every exhalation you ignore is the soil refusing to forget. I learned too late that survival here isn't earned, it's borrowed. One body stands because another lies down. One name fades because another is etched in chalk. The cemetery doesn't choose kindly or cruelly. It doesn't choose at all. It balances. And when it corrects, it doesn't ask permission. People will tell you stories of superstition. They will say the sign is a relic, that the bell is broken, that the ground is tired. Do not listen. The sign changes when you cross the bridge. The bell rings only once, and the ground is never tired. It breathes through the city like lungs through ribs. You will feel it in your knees, in your teeth, in the weight of your own chest. I have seen my name carved before its time. I've seen another name replace it while the mound still bled rainwater. There's no trick in that. There's no artisan waiting with tools. There's only earth writing its ledger, precise and endless. Do not believe you're immune. Do not believe you're unseen. Every step is counted the moment it touches soil. Never count the graves at night. If you do, one of them will already be yours. I can't say this with more certainty. The rows won't forgive your gaze. The numbers won't forgive your lips, and when the breath swells from below, you will understand too late that it's your lungs answering, not your own. I tell you this not for salvation. There's none. I tell you so you might hesitate before curiosity leads you beyond the gate. Hesitation is all you're given. No escape, no bargain, only pause. And sometimes pause is enough to keep your name unwritten for one more day. Detroit sleeps above a mouth. That is the truth. A city shaped by industry, undone by hunger, held in place by a cemetery that will never close its ledger. The factories rust, the houses fall, the streets forget their names. But Hollow Rest remembers. It remembers everything, and it waits, patient as stone, hungry as breath. I carry that sound with me now, louder than my own pulse, quieter than any prayer. It follows each step, a rhythm I can't silence. The city is gone. The ledger remains. And the graves were breathing. If you doubt me, go at dusk. Stand by the arch. Place your hand on the iron and wait. You will feel the pull through the metal, a vibration older than the city itself. Do not cross. Do not linger. Turn back before the count notices you. And if you can't resist, then remember my words. Never count. Never speak. Never stay past the bell.